Okay, you are live.
Okay. I am calling this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission shall come to order. This commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from the municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 21, section 56. The purpose of the HPC per city ordinance is to preserve and promote the preservation and appreciation of historic sites, structures, and districts. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in Chapter 21, Section 8.06. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland 1977 Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or amongst commissioners outside of a public hearing to determine the disposition of the application. I'm going to take roll. I know we're still missing some people. Let's see. Kim Finch.
Here.
Kevin Smith.
Here.
Okay, and we are missing the rest of them. We have staff in attendance, John Tower. And our reporter is Kim Consoli. Any announcements you want on the record, John?
Yes. I will bring up at the end of the meeting a proposed change to the roof on Middleton Tavern. I believe that it can be approved administratively, but I'll go into it in detail then so we don't make our presenter wait.
Okay, that's great. And we also have, under other business, we have the administrative approvals for the year from July 2022 to June 2023. We have all the administrative approvals that you did in the office. And I must say, you do a lot of administrative approvals.
We do. We
I'm
do.
sure you know far better than us how much work you do, but it is to see them all brought together like that. It's truly amazing.
Well, thank you. But this year, our numbers are much greater.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, people are. It's the post-COVID, oh my God, I need to fix up the house. And
it's impressive. One for every calendar day. And we still have, we're up into the 260s now, which would be a normal year. And we still have, 90 days left.
Still have a full quarter.
Right.
Yeah, good work, John. And I'm glad you at least have some help now.
Yes.
Well, she's coming to, she hasn't started yet. But it's all worthwhile. This is what you do, what I do. It's for a reason. It's for a cause. And that's what makes it worthwhile. So thank you.
Well, John, actually, the only thing I didn't see on the report was like a total for the number of administrative approvals you've done for the quarter, so I could quickly calculate that it was a percentage. But I think it would be impressive if you had a total of the number of reviews.
Oh, well, I'll ask Sherry to send that out.
Because
not everything gets approved.
Oh, I don't doubt that, but I mean, I do think it would be more impressive if we could, that if that total was there and we could say, well, the percentage of the total applications that were approved administratively was this, because I just remember being impressed by the Washington D.C. Historic Preservation Commission and how many they were approving administratively to demonstrate that it was not a difficult process to maneuver.
I try to tell people that it isn't difficult.
But they don't believe you. And so numbers might tell the tale.
Right. Other people can do it. You can too. Just
Exactly.
watch.
So, okay. Is there anything else before we bring our trainer forward and start that section? Nope. Okay. Madeline, can you bring our trainer forward into the main part of the meeting?
Yep, he should be in a second.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. Can everyone see and hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to give you some information, hopefully helpful information regarding design review. And I'm sure for most of you, this will be kind of a refresher type of thing, but it's always good to hear it from another source other than your own commission and commissioners. So just by way of introduction, my name is Fred Stachura, and I am the supervisor in the neighborhood revitalization section in our community planning division over at the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission in Prince George's County. I also am the president and chairman of the board of the Maryland Association of Historic District Commissions, which is really sponsoring tonight's training. And thank you, Tim, and everyone for the invitation. And I also am an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland School of Architecture, and my class is Historic Preservation Law and Public Policy. So it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. And just one caveat, I suffer from allergies this time of year. And if my voice gives out, just give me a minute and we'll come back. So just bear with me. So before we start, I'd like to just perhaps if you could introduce yourselves, briefly give a little bit of background on how long you've been on the commission and perhaps, what your interest is in preservation as a professional or a historic homeowner or whatever the case might be. And it gives me a sense of the audience. And I do want to give a special shout out to my friend and colleague, Kim Finch. And it's always a pleasure to hear her voice and see her in action on the Annapolis HPC outside of her good work in the environmental section at MNC PPC. So hi, Kim.
Hi, Fred. It's good to see you. I missed you.
I know, same here. Well, we'll be moving to our new building soon, so hopefully we'll have more of that exchange.
Okay.
So
Looking forward to it.
Likewise. So perhaps we'll start with Bobby.
I am Bobby Collins. I'm the vice chair, and I opened the meeting tonight because Tim was trying valiantly to get home from a trip he took, and it looks like he has just arrived safely. So welcome home, Tim. I have been on the commission for 6 years. I've just finished my second term, and I'm hoping to be reappointed for a third. I have a lifelong love of historic preservation, and although I don't have a formal classroom trained knowledge of it, I've taken a number of training courses and gotten involved in a lot of different things that have really furthered my knowledge and even made stronger my love for this lovely town that we live in. So
Great, thanks, Bobby. Kevin?
Yeah, my name is Kevin Smith. I've been a member of the commission for about 2 years now. I own a historic home in Annapolis, and in my professional career, I work in finance for a home builder. So, but yeah, just my wife and I renovated a historic home in Annapolis and live here with our family, our 3 children. So
Great, thank you. And Tim?
I just have to follow up, Kevin. You restored an incredibly important house, and so we really thank you for what you have done. Tim Leahy, I'm the chair. I've been on the commission since 2008. I guess architectural history was part of my DNA growing up, and we live just outside of the historic district in an older home, but we understand understand how details on a building are important. And over the years, we also understand that property owners in the historic district come to the commission and want to understand how our process works. So we want to be consistent and understand their needs too. So
Great, thanks, Tim. Kimberly?
Oh, Kimberly Consoli, thank you, Kimberly is our recorder, but she can say hello if she wants.
Okay,
And then Kim Finch.
Kim.
Oh, Fred knows too much about me already.
I know, but for the record, Kim, don't be
Yeah,
bashful.
go ahead, tell us.
No, Fred knows that I sit right next to the Historic Preservation Commission, and I work on scenic roads, scenic and historic roads and cultural landscapes in Prince George's County.
Great.
So-
And does a great job. We rely a lot on Kim. Is it Jim Tower, Jim?
John.
John, I'm sorry.
Oh, so
Yeah,
I am currently Chief of Historic Preservation. Before that, I was Assistant Chief of Historic Preservation. And while I was doing that, I still had my contracting company running. And the last client that I told I couldn't do work on their building in order to take this job was the White House. So it's I always thought that the highest and best use of my time could be preservation, but there are a lot of things that go with it. And what I see all the time is that even within historic buildings, change occurs, and we have to be open to that. But we can't allow the changes to let's say, denigrate or diminish the building's character. So,
And John,
it's a balance.
You just hit the theme of tonight's presentation.
Oh, denigrate and diminish.
No, reaching the balance, buildings change, and how do
Yes.
we balance that? Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. And
so quick question for you, Fred. I sent you an email. I hope you got it.
I did, yes.
Oh, yay. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw, I did respond to you, and I'll try.
I've been on vacation for 10 days.
Oh,
So,
no problem.
yeah.
Oh, my heart
So I'm glad you
bleeds for
saw
you.
it. I don't think any of the commissioners would question, or I lobbed a few things to Fred. Instead of going through the normal like progression, let's talk about the things that are difficult for us.
Right. Right. And we'll touch upon some of those things in the presentation. And then afterwards, we can have some questions and answers and that kind of thing. Now, Madeline, did I miss Madeline?
Madeline's the most important person here. She runs the show. She's
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start my slide, share my screen first, I guess. Share. Okay, can you hear and see the screen?
No, we can see you.
You can see me.
And we can hear you.
Okay,
not quite yet.
share. Okay. It's uploading my presentation. I don't know why I didn't do this on the little rehearsal I had. Okay.
You'll get there. It's okay.
Okay, I think it'll work this time.
Oh.
Okay, how's
There
that?
it is. There it is.
Okay, great. Let me do this from the beginning. Okay.
Yep.
We're good then. Okay, so I like to start, with a little quote here as far as how we will be judged. And if we read this quote, I like to put the quotes in context of the historical time. This is 1963. So think about what's going on in the country with respect to urban renewal and all sorts of policies that have really destroyed, many of our cities and built environments through urban renewal and other initiatives. And this, of course, is the time before the landmark case, the Penn Central case, the 1978 case, which really opened the doors for preservation and preservation ordinances, giving them legitimacy throughout the United States. So in this workshop, I want to, share information on current issues that face you, provide an overview of the design guideline process, review very briefly historic preservation standards, and discuss historic preservation issues relevant to you, and identify certain opportunities that you might have to think about, whether you're going to be doing it in the future or revising, updating design guidelines, which are really critical. And we'll go into, why.
I'll just jump right in. We are updating our guidelines.
Oh, perfect. Perfect timing then. This is all good. So, for instance, your commission objective could be to consolidate and update the previous design guidelines documents into a single user-friendly document and provide specific guidelines for each residential district. That's just an example of an objective here. One of the things that we really have to do as preservationists is, we always think about the carrots and sticks of historic preservation. And unfortunately, most people in our communities, think about historic preservationists as being the obstructionists, and we're the no people, all the things that you cannot do, we get bad rep as far as being the taste police and other things like that. But we know that that's not true, and that's a misunderstanding. So how can we combat that misunderstanding? And also to kind of promote what the incentives for historic preservation are. There are certain, preservation benefits. In and of itself, we know that historic buildings help define the character of the community. It is this tangible link to the past that's really shared by everyone, shared by not only the property owner that hopefully has an appreciation of the building, but also anyone who passes by, anybody who visits Annapolis. Tourism, very popular in your city. It can also increase neighborhood stability, through the design, review process. And there is many times a likely increase in property values. I don't like to say, this is always the case, but in many, many cases, it does, through that stability and the maintenance of historic properties, increase property values. And we want to ensure that key landmarks are appropriately preserved, for future generations. So the incentives that we have in Maryland are really, I think, very good compared to other jurisdictions throughout the country. The state has great heritage programs to take advantage of, MHT preservation grants, the federal and state rehabilitation tax credits. In Maryland, we're fortunate that we have both of them still intact. Many states only, don't have state rehab tax credits, or they have a very minimal cap on that as well. And then there's the local or county tax incentive, real property tax credits, which through the Maryland enabling legislation has permitted the counties to opt in on this. And I know that, in recent years, it has been boosted. I think it started at a low of 10%, is up to, 25% now, which is a real incentive, to reduce real estate property taxes and, to be able to carry over those rehabilitation expenses, for a number of years out. So, these are all things that we should consider when we're talking about designation, when we're talking about our historic districts, the incentives that are available to our property owners. Obviously, we can't protect anything until we know what we have. So it's really important to, have an inventory of your historic resources, your historic sites, and, have them categorized. So again, you can address these building types in your community through your design guideline process, kind of tailoring your design guidelines to the building types within a particular neighborhood or area. So in Annapolis, obviously, you have a wide range of building types in your inventory. You have your residential house styles from, the 18th, 19th, 20th century, the period revival, styles, and also as we start to look into mid-century modern, the suburban, ranch style as well. So we have to look at, the numbers, the number of in our inventory, the residential buildings, non-residential districts, individual properties listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and individually designated locally. And of course, to have the property owner understand the distinction between National Register National Register listing, which is primarily honorific, and unless we get into the Section 106 process, as opposed to the individually designated properties, which fall under your particular historic preservation ordinance. So these are some basic things that we need to do as far as having a current inventory, knowing what's out there so that we know what needs to be protected, and then being able to articulate in a very user-friendly way the distinctions in really the nomenclature that we use in historic preservation. And tonight I'm going to be breaking down, some of those words and phrases that we throw around a lot, but maybe we don't fully understand them. And certainly some of our constituents, some of our stakeholders don't understand them as well. So, what is historic? And, in my work in historic preservation, you talk to a historic let's put it this way, an owner of an old property, and you start to, really praise the either architectural style or the building itself or the background, and they'll say, well, yeah, the building's old, but it's not historic. Well, what is historic? And a lot of times, no, it's more than just being old. It is actually historic because it maybe has some architectural merits. It could be associated with a notable architect or developer, or maybe a famous person resided there, or a famous event or took place there, or it could be influential to the community development or the history. And this is really important, I think, to focus on in the 21st century as we start to look at designation criteria a little bit more critically, and maybe have a little bit more of an open mind as to what is historic and what is important to the community. I know in Prince George's County, we struggle with this a lot because some of our sites, particularly some of our African-American sites that have very strong community relationships and community history, related to a specific community, you might not have the historic integrity that we would like with regard to our designation criteria pursuant to our subtitle. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with underrepresented communities in our work in historic preservation? Is there another way? Is there an alternate way? Is there a way to honor and preserve these buildings, as they are currently being used that, again, might not fit the architectural merits, criteria? So I don't have the answers to all of this, but it is a discussion that I think you need to have, and it's an ongoing discussion that we as preservationists are having, I know, through the state of Maryland, and we are working with MHT, and we're also working through our MAHDC, the Maryland Association of Historic District Commissions, to try to address this and maybe make some policy changes or try to advocate for some policy changes with regard to designation of, to help promote the designation and honoring of underrepresented communities. So again, and also looking at buildings as contributing to our historic districts. So there's a lot of misconceptions that you got to straighten out.
Hey, Fred. Hey,
Yes.
Fred, I just want to, I had my hand up real quick.
Yeah, and feel free to interrupt me anytime.
Oh, thanks, because I probably will.
Yeah, no.
So interestingly enough, for the commissioners that are here, our period of significance is up to 1942. It's very specific. It's a very specific building. It was the recreation center. And so how do we go about changing that? It's not codified, but so maybe not right now, but later we can talk about how does generally the 50-year
Yeah, I don't want to say rule. Yeah,
So we have this thing, we actually do have the issue of 1942. If you're after 1942, you're not significant. Before that, you are. But unless we also do okay with if you after that you have some important people. But so that would be something to talk about when we get back in discussion.
yeah, no, that's a good point. So, what are some of the misconceptions about historic designation? People think, oh, tours, I have to have, the public come and look at my house or whatever. No public access requirement. We know that. The only time that you might have some kind of public access requirement is if there's a preservation easement on the property. And that's a totally separate animal. That's a private contractual relationship between the property owner and the easement holder. And but under your preservation ordinance, there's no requirement for public access. And even when I write easements, the public access can be very liberally construed. A lot of times it's visual access is satisfactory to public access. So we can prohibit, let's say, the planting of arborvitae, in front of a house that's going to block the historic house from the view from the public way. So that's public access by having a visual public access, which is not a very burdensome kind of requirement. And that's even with our easement, program. That you have to restore the property. We know that that's not required. So you could be locally designated tomorrow and nothing changes, absolutely nothing changes unless I initiate some kind of change. And then obviously, I have to go get my certificate of appropriateness. Do you have COAs or HAWPs in Annapolis? What do you call them? Your work permit?
A certificate of approval.
Approval. Okay, so it's a CO.
So it's appropriate is different than approval. So
yes, exactly. Yeah, Massachusetts has a COA, certificate of appropriateness. Montgomery, Prince George's, HAWPs. So your certificate of approval. Okay. So you don't have to do anything.
Well, it's interesting. I'll interject in our own for the benefit of the other commissioners. We have been designated for a long time, so we have this large designated area. So we don't have the issues of people worrying or understanding, but they're already in the historic district. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, it's a little bit different in other jurisdictions as well, which are developing it or maybe don't even have a historic district yet. And they're trying to advocate, for that. So you have obviously a very well-established historic preservation.
Yeah, we're now into the design details of massing and windows and paving, so
right.
We're into the details of a property owner wanting to obtain approval within our guidelines, and our guidelines are pretty clear. So
right,
it's working pretty well, but.
Yeah, so alterations, additions, they are approved. They are permitted with your approval and review. Interior alterations, not subject to review.
Correct.
Under most historic preservation ordinances throughout the country. Landscape alterations, that depends on how your ordinance is written. Many times there are structural features that can be seen from the public right away that could be subject to review, such as walkways, entrance gates, any kind of decorative work like that. But I don't think you're going to be regulating, where the rose bush could be planted, that kind of thing.
So now that we're in an interactive discussion here, we have a discussion on a frequent basis in terms of the 360 review. The front of the property versus the back of the property and around, and that would be interesting. What is the trend in terms of 360 review.
Yeah, well, I can say that I think I'm seeing more of the trend to include that 360 view and not just what is seen from the public right away. However, what is not seen from the public right away is could be reviewed on a little bit different basis. For instance, I worked
Correct.
with a couple
It
of
would lean more lenient.
more lenient. Yes, yeah, exactly. So, if you're going to put an addition on the rear of your historic house, and you're looking to use cementitious siding on that new addition, there are many that would approve that. I don't know if
We
that
still don't. We still don't.
you still don't, and that that's fine. And we're going to get into it's the climate of where you are and what the tolerance of the people really are. Like, I know that there's one community that I know of that regulates paint color, and that's Nantucket. And Nantucket has
I literally started my morning in Nantucket.
okay.
I drove from Nantucket to Annapolis today. So
Well,
there you go.
Well,
It makes
you
it
took the
very
ferry.
boring.
You took the ferry, and then you drove from.
I did.
Yeah,
It was very Nantucket is boring.
Nantucket is boring. Well, I like to say, don't faint, it's only paint. It is reversible. Paint still does protect, even if it's an ugly color, it does still protect the wood underneath. And do we really want to get into that whole, taste?
We don't.
Kind of thing.
We're done with that. Luckily.
You don't. You don't. So I know that Nantucket is one of the few places that does have a color palette of approvable paint colors, but please don't go there.
We won't.
So anyway, and then
Kevin has a question. Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Kevin has a question.
yeah, please call
Yeah,
out the
well,
questions.
I was just going to add that we're lucky to have the water views as another component that isn't always there for historic districts. So
Yeah,
it does change a lot of our approvals, what it looks like from the water.
that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. So, the 360, I like the 360 approach. And I know that we do have that, in Prince George's and Montgomery counties, where, it's not only the building itself, but it's what we call the whole entire historic site, which tends to be the entire parcel, which also takes in some of these landscaping features, as well as contributing and non-contributing accessory buildings, barns and sheds and garages and, that kind of thing as well. So
we are a very urban
Right.
historic district. We don't have that. But Kevin raises a really good point that the 360 review involves view sheds around street ends
and waterfront
harbor views.
Right. Then repainting, obviously, if it's general routine maintenance, not reviewed, just to paint surfaces, that type of thing. So, there's a lot of misconception, out there. So one of the things that we, talk about as far as our nomenclature is we talk about this thing about, historic integrity. What is historic integrity? And, here's a kind of a good definition by the National Park Service. And it deals with, obviously, the location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And then when you get to, feeling and association, that's kind of like very loosey-goosey kind of stuff, but that's okay, and I think that that's written that way to actually, be more encompassing and inclusive of things that we can evaluate integrity on. One thing that's really important that I'd like to obviously stress in a design workshop is, really understanding what the character defining features of, let's say, a house, is. So here we have this kind of Tudor Revival house, and it has, each of these styles have distinctive architectural character defining elements, and if one of those things is lost, then you really, have degraded that property. It has lost that character defining features, and it really is no longer a good example of what that style, is or was. So obviously in a Tudor Revival, we have this steeply sloped roof with multiple gables, tall step chimney, wood casement windows, wood louvers at gable faces and a lack of a porch. So if, for instance, we take away, this stone front entrance here on this little illustration and change the roof line, we have really diminished the architectural integrity, of this particular property. And when we look at historic districts, we obviously look at our buildings differently. What is a contributing building? What is a non-contributing building? So the contributor certainly adds to the historic and architectural qualities and associations. It's built during that period of significance, and it possesses historic integrity. It has all of those component parts that make it what it is as a particular style. The non-contributing building doesn't add to any, historic architectural qualities. It's outside the period of significance, or due to various alterations or accretions, over the period of time, it has lost, its integrity. But, we should also, consider, our review of a non-contributing building, because, it is still part of a district, and particularly when we're dealing with new infill construction in our historic districts, to make sure that there's compatible design as far as scale, massing, materials, and all those other things. So we're talking about these characters.
Hey, I'm going to
go ahead.
interjecting again. Non-contributing buildings, which might be on a street that had an important person that lived on that street, or the community themselves believes that they talk about this. So should we make sure we keep that to a higher standard?
So you're saying should you make the non-contributing buildings a higher standard?
Yes.
That not more.
Well, again, we're I'm just introducing the concept of that might in our curious significance at 1942 and maybe needs to be moved to 1972.
Right,
and
exactly.
So some people that lived on this street in 1970 might be important to the community. So how do we navigate that? I know that's an unfair question, but what do you think?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that non-contributing buildings should be, set to a certain standard. I don't think that they should just be let off the hook. They are in a historic district. They do, even though they might not be quote unquote historically non-contributing, they are visually contributing or detracting to a historic district. So I think you have to look at kind of the whole ensemble of buildings within the district, including contributing and non-contributing buildings, and they should be held to a standard. That's just my opinion. That I think.
So you're saying it's not like a 1-0, 1-0. It's
exactly. Yeah. So, we, in our historic districts, let's look at what's important in those historic districts. Is there a park in the center of the neighborhood? That should be considered. We want to keep, these narrow, deep lots. Uniform building setbacks, really important, so that we have, a certain rhythm to the buildings as we walk down the streets, right? If they're prominently one story, want to make sure that they stay predominantly one story, or, if it's a commercial street, whatever, 3-story brick, whatever, and you don't want to, have a 6-story building that breaks up that nice pattern and rhythm of development. You're looking at the materials that are really kind of traditional and native to your particular area. What does Annapolis have? You have a lot of, wood frame buildings. You have, brick buildings, not so much stucco, that kind of thing. Also looking at the window types, and we're going to talk more about windows, but that are characteristics in a certain historic district that you obviously want to keep in touch. Porte cocheres and carports and detached garages, they are all significant within your district, and again, part of the integrity of that whole property. And then, looking at traditional landscaping, as far as mature trees and shrubs and things like that may be important to the particular to the particular setting and context, of that structure. So these are all things that
Yeah.
help us navigate through what is character defining or not.
Interesting. Again, I hope you don't mind that
I don't. I actually enjoy it.
We're a dialogue here. We have, for instance, in the residential aspect of our historic district in Murray Hill, and this is very important. This stuff, and then we have the more dense commercial and smaller area. So we always have to go back and forth between aspects of residential houses that were built in 1900 and 1910 compared to houses that were built in way before that, and then we have commercial buildings. So we have a complicated series of things, but this slide has to do, I think, a lot with exterior renovations, and what triggered me was the word porte cochere.
Yeah.
we actually have porte cocheres, right, John? There are a few.
John, you mute.
Yeah, we do have porte cocheres, but we do have to note that we are beginning to not relocate buildings, but we're beginning with the process of raising buildings.
Yeah, I'll talk about that too.
Changes the context.
It does. It will change the context, but then it's the balancing act. It's the balancing act. It's trying to, what do we do to actually protect the gem, so to say. If we have to raise it because of rising waters and to prevent water damage and mold and other kinds of things that could permeate or penetrate these houses, we need to elevate them or lose them eventually. So it really is trying to decide what the gemstone is. It comes to, if we look at a diamond ring, the diamond is probably obviously the most valuable part. The setting is really important, but sometimes maybe we have to make some sacrifices to the setting with these extraordinary, climate conditions that we face. And I know Annapolis, you're facing a lot of this. And I've also dealt with some folks in Newport as well, in the Point section of Newport, that are facing the same exact thing. So you raised a good point. But
however, the point in Newport is ahead of us
in elevating buildings.
Yes, and their finished product is actually, I think, pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I've gone, I've looked.
All right,
Sorry.
John, you've got yourself down on our next agenda. You're going to show us what that is then.
Yeah, well, Newport Restoration Foundation does a great job. And, I think that they really are trying to be careful stewards, but trying to do this balancing act in the most skillful way possible. But yeah, it's obviously something, I know it's a hot issue in Annapolis. So anyway, we can talk a little bit more about that, but thank you. So, modifying historic properties, obviously retaining and maintaining the character defining features as set forth, following the Secretary of Interior standards. So the standards, as we know, are broadly written. They're broadly written for a purpose so that we can actually use them as the framework in our design guidelines where we can be much more specific. So again, John, this gets to kind of what you mentioned too. We want to avoid relocation, substantial alteration or demolition. The relocation, obviously, the context is important. And relocation should be really a last resort to preservation. But sometimes, that is the last resort. In many years ago in my previous life, working as attorney representing the College Hill Neighborhood Association in Providence, I was always dealing with Brown University because institutions tend to expand, and wherever they were expanding, it was in a national landmark district. And sometimes, we did have to move houses to avoid, demolition. So again, it's this balancing act. It's not ideal, but again, we want to preserve the diamond. We need to consult with our preservation design guidelines and also work very closely with our historic preservation office, the historic preservation staff. Obviously, an applicant should work closely with the historic preservation staff before you begin your certificate of approval process, because this needs to be really, it's not an adversarial process at all. You should be, holding yourself out as a resource to these property owners, to work with the property owners so that you as staff can present to the commission an approvable application. And I know sometimes that's not possible, right? Because sometimes an applicant just doesn't want to give, and they'll say, hey, well, I don't agree, and I'll let the commission decide. Well, there's nothing much that staff can do, as far as that goes. But for the most part, people are willing to listen, and people are also willing to kind of get some free professional advice that doesn't come, that frequently in life. And so you've got professional staff, you've got resources at your disposal to try to work with the applicant to try to bring to you the most approvable application as possible.
I kept on doing this, but we are in good shape.
Good. And then, exterior alterations, including site work, any kind of grading and things like that, should be reviewed with respect to your design guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards. Some basic stuff here. This is just kind of reminder stuff for you. We obviously, in our historic downtowns want to maintain the traditional commercial storefront features. So the front at the sidewalk edge, no setback really. Display windows, many of us remember the days when people went actually window shopping at night, and they had lots of windows, and they also had these recess entries with more windows, so you could see everything that the shop was peddling, after hours. The vertical upper windows, horizontal moldings, the cornices, these are all things that should be maintained and retained. Obviously, we're looking at the preservation of original materials, the repair of original materials, and then replacement of original materials only when they can't be, repaired. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We've seen, particularly in the 1960s and 70s, maybe even in the 80s, covering original materials with quote unquote modern materials to make these buildings look more contemporary. We want to try to remove that stuff and encourage the removal of that stuff. Maintenance of all original wood, preservation of masonry, so making sure that buildings are repointed appropriately, the appropriate mortar mix with that, and also to prevent painting of bricks that have never been painted before. We want to avoid that, obviously, and also the maintenance of roof materials. So we don't want our features obscured. This is a before picture here. And, a lot of this aluminum type of siding was put on buildings to make them modern. This was the time when the shopping mall was being developed in the suburbs, and Main Street couldn't compete, and they wanted to try to compete, and they wanted to make be more relevant, be more modern, whatever the case is. And they did a lot of this stuff, particularly when the second and third story of the buildings were no longer utilized. And then, bringing these buildings back, this is the same block here, is quite amazing. What could be done when you peel away this material and then restore the commercial storefronts and restore, the cornices. So, the restoration of original materials, and even, encouraging through photographic documentation and other kinds of documentation, some of the original features. So, the building on the left is not so bad, right? But with a little bit of consulting and, paint work and removing of some of these features and putting in maybe some more appropriate materials. You have this interesting coining that was original to the building, and the dental work is a little bit more pronounced, and the cornice is a little bit more pronounced by looking back at some of the historic photographs and just bringing. This was not an expensive project, but it certainly has a lot of curb appeal to it. Okay, so the purpose of design guidelines, and I really, you guys are in good shape with this, and I know, Tim, you mentioned that you're in the process now, but we want to guide property owners in making, these decisions about appropriate treatments, and to apply the standards and really to tailor these guidelines to the particular neighborhoods and particular style. Now, why do we have guidelines to begin with, or why should we have guidelines? Number one is really, I like to say, a legal reason, because you want to make sure that your commission is not making arbitrary and capricious decisions, right? So let's say, for instance, you have a property owner that has a historic Cape style house, right? And they want to put two dormers, in the front. And they come before the commission, and the argument's made, and they have an architect, and the scale looks okay, and it looks appropriate enough, and you make that approval. And then 12 months later, the neighbor comes out with a proposal and says, I want to put dormers in my house and on the front elevation. Oh, no, we don't do that anymore. We're not permitting that anymore. And I'm sorry, you're out of luck. Well, are you treating similarly situated property owners the same? That's a question, And here I would say, no, you're not, because what are you relying on? Taste, your own taste. You change the rule in midstream. So this is where your standards have to have lots of pictures. Your design guidelines, rather, should have lots of pictures and big X's in the areas, no, this is not permitted, or a big check mark, yes, this is what we do like. And it does help the property owner. It helps guide the property owner, but it also makes your decision easier, as far as what's permissible and what's not permissible in that particular, historic district. So I want to give you an example. This is, I was asked to consult on this not terribly long ago. This is actually in Bristol, Rhode Island. Bristol is an old seaport town, not that different. Anybody been to Bristol? Okay, Tim, you're familiar. Okay. Oh, good. John, too. Bristol's an old seaport town, yachting community, Herreshoff Yachts, America's Cup Builders, it became very affluent also during the Triangle Trade, slave trade, and wonderful buildings just, around town. So this property owner called me, and he owns this wonderful building here on Hope Street, which is the main street. And it had the original roof. The building is around, I want to say around 1870, and it had the original slate roof on the building. And the slates, started to deteriorate, and the pins on the slate, were rusting out or whatever and falling. The slates, they had to close part of the sidewalk, until a repair was made. So the Historic Preservation Commission had asked, said, well, when are you going to put the slate roof back on? And the property owner said, I'm not putting a slate roof on. And so anyway, that's when I got involved in it. And the property owner called me and said, I need a little bit of help. Now, as a preservationist, as a preservation attorney, this was really a hard thing for me to do, but I'll explain the problem. So the first thing I did was I went to the Historic Preservation office and I said, could I have your design guidelines, please? I want to look at this. We don't have design guidelines. I said, you don't have design guidelines? In Bristol, you don't have design guidelines? No, we don't have design
Oops.
guidelines. Yeah, oops. I said, okay, then what do you do in a case like this? Well, we look at the buildings around it and we look at the context of the building. Okay, thank you very much. I'm taking a tour of the town. So here's the street sidewalk. You can see it's an elevated sidewalk. So when you're actually standing on that elevated main portion of the sidewalk, you can't see the roof at all. It's completely, you cannot see it. So I'm walking around, and then I started to do a little bit of research. And lo and behold, there's St. Michael's Episcopal Church with a beautiful polychrome slate roof on it. And then the building in the foreground here is the Masonic Temple, and it's a restaurant down below, which had a slate roof on it, which was replaced by an asphalt shingle roof. Okay. Then, so this is my building, the one I'm working on. The roof has been taken off because of the hazard, and this is just temporary before a new roof before the HDC decided on it. But look at what's around it. The building to the left has an asphalt shingle roof. The building to the far right, the brick building with the dental work there at the corners, has an asphalt shingle roof. It had a slate roof. So this is also one of the ancillary church meeting guild halls, and this has a wonderful slate roof on it as well. This residential building had a slate roof on it and now has an asphalt shingle roof. So I made the argument to the Historic Preservation Commission that the subject building, you need to approve a good architectural asphalt shingle roof, not a slate roof. The cost for the slate roof came in around $375,000 too. And so anyway, after making I said, look, it appears in town, and I said, I was directed by your staff to look around in town and look at the context. I've concluded this: in any public or quasi-public buildings, like a church, like the town hall, like that guild hall, like the library, they all have slate roofs that have been maintained. The private buildings, like this house, like this private commercially owned building, like the Masonic Temple private building, you have permitted asphalt shingle roofs. And, I ended up basically saying, shame on you. After they approved the asphalt shingle roof, I said, shame on you, you need to get design guidelines, because this is what happens. And I don't like saying this or doing this, because I would have loved to have seen a slate roof, put on there. Or if not slate, do your design guidelines permit, the synthetic slate? And, some of our synthetic materials have really improved over the years. And, some of them now are starting to show that they will endure the test of time. So interesting story, but I like it because it put me in an awkward position as a preservationist. It put the Historic Preservation Commission in a very awkward position. And it really emphasized the importance, like, you gotta be kidding me, you don't have design guidelines, that kind of thing. John.
Now, Fred, did you push the historic tax credits?
Yes, push the historic tax credits, but
I know it's still a big number.
It's still a big number, and I will tell you this. In doing my research for this, the Rhode Island state tax credits are pale in comparison to the Maryland tax credit. The state tax credits in Rhode Island, Rhode Island had one of the most robust historic preservation tax credit programs in the country. In 2008, it was completely disseminated to zero. And they're just starting to rebuild it back up. So there are caps on it and all this kind of stuff. And it's a longer, more complicated process than Maryland, because I've, obviously have been working in Maryland over the past 16 years and, familiar with that. But yeah, I did do that, but it still was a big number. So anyway, it's a good story.
I'll add that the tax credits in Maryland,
Yeah.
From personal experience, they didn't change what I did with the property, and the experience of working with MHT and the lack of responsiveness from MHT cost more than the tax credits were worth.
Yeah. Sometimes,
Well, gosh, Kevin, how did we do?
So Kevin, you're saying it really, it's an impediment. It's not an incentive.
It is an incentive. I mean, it's real money at the end of the day. So I'm not gonna like say that much negative, but the process, well, mostly it was the lack of responsiveness that was quite frustrating. I mean, time is money, quite literally, for these
Sure.
property owners. Most of them don't own the property outright, so they're paying interest every month. And yeah, the staff at MHT was, I don't know if they're just overwhelmed and backlogged, but their timelines were shockingly bad, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're
Well,
saying
yeah,
if we're gonna
Kevin,
if
how
we're
did-
gonna market tax incentives, it has to actually work.
well,
Exactly.
how did the city do?
I didn't apply for tax credits with the city, but there were the time, in my experience, the time responsiveness of the city was not the holdup of my process.
Yeah. So if we want to push tax incentives, we need to make sure that it works, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I think our
I was going to say a lower number. Like if I were talking to my representative, I would say, give half of my number to MHT and guarantee a response rate, and you'll get more success with a guaranteed timeline than you will with more money.
So we need to talk to MHT more.
Yeah.
Well,
And I know-
I want to say that I think the city's process is pretty simple for an approvable project. And Kevin, I didn't know you then, but boy, do I wish I had tried to promote it. Oh well.
Well, the stuff that we were doing was outside the scope because it was mostly interior work we were doing
So
anyway.
let me just say for the record, for those who are not familiar with the details, electrical rehab, life safety, and some other interior work is approvable for tax credits. It's actually within the code. I'm sorry, I just never talked to you all about it. But yeah, it's sometimes it's surprising what can be covered. And of course, the city also pushes very strongly sprinkler systems for life safety, not so much for property protection, but certainly for life safety. And you can obtain a 0% loan for that. The city tries on that.
So a
Just
0%
mentioning it.
loan for 0% loan for
Sprinkler system.
sprinkler systems.
While they last. So much of this is, and if you act now.
Oh, there you go. Well, this is great information, and again, we're a bit off topic, but
Sorry.
no, you don't need to be sorry. This is why we're here, to talk about
Exactly.
things that come up
Exactly. And it's good to
in
hear
our
Kevin's own experience too.
exactly.
That's
Well,
really important.
Kevin didn't restore a house. He restored one of the houses. It's pretty remarkable.
Bravo. Really. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, let's talk about a little bit about accommodating change within historic context. Obviously, as preservationists, we believe that, the best way to preserve a building is to have it continually used, right? But we also try to make these changes so that they can adapt to modern, 21st century living without ruining, the integrity, of these properties. So we want to identify and retain what these distinctive qualities are, these distinctive features and characteristics are, and we want to maintain, protect, and repair them, when possible. So we want to retain the authentic historic building to the maximum extent possible. So if you buy a historic house and you start filling with things that might not be perfect in a historic house, like for instance let's say you have an 18th century house and there's nothing plumb in the house, and you want to try to straighten the doors and you want to straighten, everything out, and you're getting new materials and you're ripping out the thresholds because they're worn out, and the stair treads because they're worn, so you're putting new stair treads. What's left of a historic?
That never happens around here.
Oh, no.
So Kevin, when you needed to actually install some HVAC into your house too, and how, so Fred, do you see a lot of historic buildings that want to install the dual HVAC units in them?
As far as like ruining the integrity of them by putting the HVAC systems in, or
I think you mean split system.
That's what I mean.
the split system. Yeah, the split. I'll tell you. I mean, there's some really good systems out there. Space Pack is a really good system. It's a very small system, and they use a lot of historic houses. Very quiet, very efficient. But that's more of major installation kind of thing, as opposed to the split systems. I've worked with historic homeowners that have had ducts, heating systems that have been converted to both heat and AC very smoothly, with no additional damage or intrusion into the house. The Space Pack system, and this is just personally, I don't like the spider.
Sorry, it's called Space Pack?
Space Pack, S space PAC. If you look them up online, you'll see they're very minimally intrusive, highly efficient, and
Small diameter.
Yes, small diameter. Yeah.
They're like this.
Yeah. Yes, very small, and that's really recommended. I really like that. I've worked with some architects that really do promote that. The split systems, boy, I just don't like the spider webs on the side of the house, and
So don't you have to work with your architect to make sure that they are designed so that they are rectangular?
Yeah. So anyway,
Which worked on Kevin's house.
Yeah, some of them are well installed because they're thoughtfully installed. Others are just kind of slapped on, and it's not ideal. But anyway, so we do try to, obviously, HVAC systems, contemporary bathrooms, contemporary kitchens, and things like that, where obviously those interior spaces don't come in under the purview of the of your Historic Preservation Commission. But obviously, if you're guiding property owners, you want to, even on the interior, make suggestions with regard to what's important, what's not important, or lesser importance. The standards, I'm not going to go through the standards. You know what the standards are, but there's one that I want to just highlight here, which is the standard 9, that the new work shall be differentiated from the old. And this has been a really painful source for many historic preservation commissions, because many architects take great liberty, with this, and they think that this is the opportunity for them to express themselves as the architect, and really not pay homage to the historic house. This is when the tail is wagging the dog type of thing, because the new addition is not subordinate to the historic house. But we can fulfill this standard by respecting the historic house. Again, your choice of materials, the size, obviously, maybe picking up on a theme.
The finishes,
Right, but maybe a little bit more simplified. I mean, we don't want to, what they're basically saying is you don't want a false sense of history. So how can it be differentiated? We want to be able to tell the difference, but you can have a brand new addition that is still so respectful of the historic architectural features of the main house. So this is, I think, one of the standards that's really the commissioners really have to understand this, because you get a
Yeah.
slick architect in there and they start using this argument here that you have to approve this glass, this glass and steel addition on the 17th century wood frame house. It's like,
Yeah.
no, nonsense, so just something to be mindful of.
Yeah. Hey, Fred, real quick.
Yeah.
Is there a trend now to look at those 10 SOI standards and rewrite them?
Yeah.
That's the first time, literally the first time I've asked that question, because we base our standards on those. Is there any movement? Because some of them don't make sense anymore, frankly.
Some of them don't make sense anymore. And, I had been working on some tax credit projects, rehabilitation tax credit projects with the Park Service, and we talked about the standards. And I think that there is some kind of movement to refashion them and to make some clarifications, because of these certain standards that are vague, but also that give, I think, a little bit too much liberty.
Correct.
In the
Exactly.
interpretation,
Yeah.
and so I think that there is, and we might see something, because I think we're going to see some changes, even with respect to looking at NR criteria and things like that, but also then going back and looking at the standards as well. So yeah. So just some basic, guiding principles as far as making
Right.
changes to historic properties. If a feature is missing or has to be removed or replaced, use accurate documentation to make sure you get it right. Again, we don't want this conjectural, interpretation. We want to be historic as we can. We want to be accurate. Respect the evolution and historic, fashions of the building. Again, there are features that came on later that could have accrued historic significance, in their own right. And I'll give you an example. We don't want to try to improve the house or the historicity of the house, so to say, by taking away historic features, by improving them, by putting in something that we think might have been there in the 18th century. So I actually made this mistake when I was a young preservationist, and we bought our first historic house in Rhode Island, and it was a 18th century. It was a 1770s house that was Greek revivalized, which was great. It had some simple, very Greek revival features to it, but still had some federal features, mostly federal features to it. But the rear door, they put in this tombstone door. You familiar with the tombstone door? It's think of an old-fashioned tombstone, the arched, it has the two arches, and it was probably more of an Italianate era style door. And I just said, oh, this door has to go. This is not federal. It's not a Greek revival. It's like this Italianate thing. And I took out the door, I removed it, and I put in a more new, colonial panel door. And I regret doing that, because it was kind of a great door in a sense. And as I drive around, I see them, I say, yeah, I had a door like that. And it was the old growth wood and all that kind of stuff. So again, we can make these mistakes very innocently or trying to do the right thing. But looking back in my years of, being a preservationist, it's something that I would not do today, if I was put in that same position. So it's the same thing. You see early houses, 18th century houses that may have an Italianate portico or some brackets or things like that. It's like, oh, that doesn't quite go, but it's like, no, that's really kind of developed into its own style and tells us the history of the building, and also how, maybe the people that live there were trying to keep up with the fashion of the time, that kind of thing, by putting in these brackets and the Italianate features in their portico. Again, just something to think about. So we don't want to be conjectural, and we don't want to use methods, employ methods that are going to damage our historic buildings. Like, obviously, we don't want to sandblast brick, and we want to be careful, how we maintain, these buildings and repair these buildings. So, we want to accommodate change in a sensitive manner that helps strengthen the historic character. So, where is new construction required? Uh, where new construction is required, I want to put that new addition on, whatever. We want to design the new addition, in a respectful manner, as I mentioned. We don't want to obliterate the historic landscapes. We want to follow, established design principles and maintain the character defining features. So maybe it's putting it at the rear of the building, or, not blowing out an important doorway to put the addition on. Maybe going through a secondary window, putting a doorway there to a hyphen link that opens up to a rear addition, something like that, that respects that character. And we want to accommodate the new program of use, to the maximal extent possible without destroying the character, of the existing property. So we want to respect the landscape, maintain a high quality of design and craftsmanship. So materials really become, I think, a very important feature when we talk about accommodating change, and particularly accommodating change with new construction. Again, new construction shouldn't detract from the main building. And buildings, we have to understand, that we're not a frozen in time preservation commission. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make these places livable, but making allowances to changes for 21st century living, maybe in our bathrooms and in our kitchens or whatever, but not destroying
Exterior. We're exterior only, so.
Yeah, right. I live right outside of Old Town Alexandria, and so I can walk to Old Town. I can't afford to live there, but I walk to it. And at night you go through, and not that you're peeking or whatever, but the people have their lights on, and you can see the inside. And so many of the interiors of Old Town have been lost, just gutted out, and they look like contemporary suburban, rooms. It's quite sad. It really is quite sad. The exterior is obviously protected through, their preservation ordinance, but we've lost so much. Tim, you just came back from Nantucket. Years ago, and I mean a long time ago, there were bumper stickers on Nantucket and in the preservation world, in and around Massachusetts and Rhode Island, gut fish, not houses. Because it was this craze that was going on, that people were just gutting, the interior of these houses. So it's something that we should, although we can't regulate it through our ordinance, again, when we have an opportunity to speak with property owners, it's something that we should really advocate for. So integrity, this is another one of those words. What is integrity as far as the historic house goes? So, we talked about the 7 qualities that the National Register looks at, which is the second bullet here. And, so when we look at integrity, another, term of art comes up. We look at the historic fabric. So what is this historic fabric? It's looking at the intact porches, windows, stairways, trim, stone, authentic woodwork, brickwork, windows. They all make up the historic significance, of the building. So, we could have a building that is in poor condition, but has a lot of integrity because there's a lot of historic fabric that's left in that building. And, you come across these every so often. It's, for example, a house that's been in the family for 200 years. And, the old dowager woman finally dies, and she hasn't done anything in there. Nothing's been changed, since 1920. And, it's all intact, but maybe the walls are cracked. Maybe there's a lot of work that has to be done, repair work, but it has high integrity because of the historic fabric that's there. So again, this is what we mean by high integrity. The degree in which these significant materials and features, exist, on that property. And so again, if you have the integrity, it's associated with the significance. And the significance, again, we're looking at these buildings, National Register criteria as they stand now, associated with the events, broad patterns of history, associated with the lives of people, embody a distinctive type of building or method of construction, or, they've yielded or may yield, a lot of important historic information. So, historic significance does accrue to the building and changes. We have to look at the evolution, of a building. As I said, the Victorian porch that was added on to an 1850s vernacular farmhouse, would be over like 133 years old now. So that does accrue, the significance. So removing that particular feature, we got to think twice about that, because maybe it is telling the story, and maybe it reflects how people have changed their living habits. That maybe when the house was first built, there was a dirt road and not many people went on that road, and then the Victorian era comes on and porches become fashionable, and living outdoors and indoor spaces kind of become merged a little bit more, and people got into indoor plants and gardening and stuff like that, and they wanted a place for their plants, and they wanted a place to sit and watch the traffic go by. So it does tell a story, by putting these additions on. Why did they do that? Why did they put that porch on? And maybe we shouldn't be tearing it out to peel back the house back to its, in this case, in the 1850s appearance. So authenticity, the character, of the property, of a historic property, representing a substantial portion of the original fabric and materials, so
Yikes. Holy Trinity and I am Pei's
you got it.
power.
When I was very young, a young boy, I remember that the John Hancock Tower was being built, and it at one time was called the Plywood Palace, because all of the glass was falling out into the streets. There was a deficiency in how that glass was fabricated.
Yes, I'm sorry, but we diverge.
But we diverge. But you've got a good eye. Yes. So anyway, authenticity. We look at the character of a historic property represented, the original fabric, the materials. We look at the interpretation of that building, and it's the authenticity is related to the interpretation of the property, as the two are entwined and interrelated.
Well, I'll just go back, if you would. We're going to be dealing with a design coming up in the next few weeks that the word authenticity should be important to think about. Yeah, we're going to have a major project coming up on the city dock, and the word authenticity is something we should be considering.
All right, good to know. Good.
I'm not sure that has been a guiding principle for the design.
Well, I just brought it up.
That's
John,
for you to ponder.
You chimed in.
That's for you to ponder.
So let's read the character. So, this is important as we review what's coming up. And I thought that triggered something in me. So thanks.
All right, very good. I talked about a little bit about this integrity versus condition. So integrity reflects the presence of these authentic materials, and the condition, goes to the appearance and the structural soundness of it. So again, a building with a sagging roof, peeling paint, broken windows might be in poor condition, but it could have a high degree of integrity. So that's really important. So just because
we see this,
doesn't look good, it doesn't look nice, there still could be an awful lot of historic integrity left to that building.
You're right.
So again, something to think about. So these again are terms that we should all be familiar with when we talk.
We
about,
are.
Okay, preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. So obviously, just when I think about rehabilitation, the thing that comes into my mind is adaptive reuse, or adaptive reuse of a building. Thinking about an old mill building that's put to contemporary uses. So I like to say, uh, new wine in old bottles, right? We're keeping the form, we're keeping that exterior, but the interior, the spaces, whatever, could be changed, but it should still convey the historic and cultural and architectural values. They should not be obliterated. And of course, when you're doing tax credit projects with adaptive reuse, you're going to be working with Secretary of Interior standards. You're going to be working with the State Historic Preservation Office to make sure that your building qualifies for the tax credits, and you're not being too aggressive in changing some of the character defining features of the building. Restoration and reconstruction, I think about restoration is kind of like this particular time type of thing. I think a little bit more about Williamsburg stuff, and same thing with reconstruction here. Reconstruction is interesting. I've dealt with reconstruction in the easement program that we have in Prince George's County and other easements I've worked on. So reconstruction can be a wonderful thing. And let's say you have a house, and the house is a historic 18th century house, and 60% of the house catches on fire, is destroyed by fire. You have a wonderful insurance policy that is going to reconstruct that portion, board by board, nail by nail, exactly the way it was built originally. Then you have to figure and step back and say, okay, that's really nice. It looks great. But do I have a historic house? How much of the house is historic? So I know that 60% is new, 60% is new construction, 40% is historic. So when I look at my easement, this would be a way that I would argue to extinguish the easement, because do I really want an easement on a house that's only 40% historic? Something to think about. So
yeah, it's interesting. We don't get into these kind of in our preservation commission. We don't get into those kind of judgments.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We don't. It doesn't come up. So it's just interesting what you might be comparing us to other commissions. That the decision actually is well before they reach us for approval or not approval.
Right. Okay, so I'm not going to spend time going over these terms. I think we did enough here, and you're well acquainted with that. So
yes.
I just want to step back a little bit and talk about what should happen, before the hearing, before coming before your commission. As I mentioned, the consultation should take place with staff, and I got the thumbs up there. I know that that's happening well.
We're good. Actually, we do this really. John does a great job of all of this.
That's so good to hear. And I do these trainings throughout the state of Maryland, and you are so fortunate because you've got professional staff. We're fortunate in Prince George's County, and I know Montgomery County too, we have professional staff, but those places that don't and have maybe no staff, or one staff person that is just kind of a neophyte at this, you're really lucky. So you're way ahead of the game here.
Yeah, it's great for us to understand that we are way ahead of all of
way
this
ahead
stuff.
of
And sometimes we maybe should reach out to some of the other organizations, smaller municipalities that we're a model, maybe.
Exactly. It certainly wouldn't hurt. Okay, now I want to get into some treatment of the features, and I'm going to go through these roofs, dormers, gutters, skylights, trims, synthetic materials, windows, and shutters. I'll go through each one. Obviously not going to go into it in great depth, but just kind of hit upon the things that are important. So windows, obviously. Issue comes up all the time: window repair versus window replacement. Obviously, we want to restore our historic wood windows. I talked about painting brick surfaces. It's something we don't want to do. Roofs and related features. So you know, roofs obviously are an important character defining features. We don't want to change the roof lines. We don't want to change those gables, turrets, chimneys. These all should be preserved. Even when chimneys are no longer in use, right? We've had applications where, oh, I don't use the fireplace doesn't work, or it's too dangerous, or whatever the case is, I want to take the chimney down. It's like, no, that's actually a character defining feature that should be preserved. You know, we want to preserve the historic detailings of the cornices and barge boards and eaves, obviously. Remove elements that cannot be repaired. Again, if there's any deteriorated features, they should be replaced, you know, in kind, keeping the same material, form, shape, and function of the original. You know, rooftop additions, you know.
Hello.
Yep.
Yes,
Go
we
ahead.
have these.
Oh, what did you say? No?
No, we have these. This is an issue for us.
Yeah, rooftop additions, you know, generally are not appropriate to historic buildings, you know. So putting on that additional floor. There are some cases, however, you know, particularly in commercial buildings, when you're looking to get additional square foot of rental space to make the actual project work, you know, depending on how it is set back and not visible from the public street, and how it doesn't obscure some of the historic detailing of the cornice or other features, it can be done, but it has to be cleverly done and carefully done. But generally speaking, you know, it's not something that we want to routinely approve. So the roofs want to preserve the basic form. Materials should appear similar, preserve the chimneys and the other detailings. Dormers, new dormers, you know, we talked a little bit about this. You know, the dormers are common, you know, we like to see the dormers in the back of the property.
Yeah, we don't have any new dormers.
Okay, good.
We don't have any new dormers.
Good. That's good to know.
We can skip ahead, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, the dormers, again, not on the primary feature. You guys don't seem to.
We don't see this.
Well, we approved one 4 years ago.
There you go.
Was it on a primary?
Yeah, we might have them on the edge of the district when buildings are done, but not
Yeah.
We don't have this either. Gutters and downspouts. We don't have this too much.
You don't have this too much. Yeah, I mean, gutters and downspouts. Obviously, you need to make sure.
Interestingly, we don't.
You don't. Yeah.
No, interesting. We don't.
Yeah. So you know, we just want to make sure that these systems are working. They're important. They keep moisture out of the house, out of the basement, and you know, help preserve the building. So we want to be sensitive to that, and you know, the appropriate kinds of materials as well. Skylights. Do you have skylight issues?
Our skylights and solar panels are merged now. So,
well, I'm sorry. What did you say?
Well, we have a skylight actually guideline, which works exactly as you say here. Okay. And over the years, when we've talked about solar panels, we've kind of merged them with skylights. So we actually need to change our guidelines to address the difference between skylights and solar panels.
Yeah, and I think that's a distinction that could be clearly made. And you know, we'll talk about your solar panel. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that. Historic wood siding and trim. Obviously, we want to preserve, retain, and repair the authentic wood siding. Replace only what is deteriorated. Everything should be the same appearance, same dimensional, you know, qualities. You know, that kind of thing. So we want to encourage the removal of siding, like for instance, in this, it has the asbestos siding, and to peel that back so you get, you know, more of the original. This is not a very good slide, but it is a shingled siding that was underneath there and that was restored. This is just a slide here that shows the importance of keeping the original and only replacing the clapboards that are deteriorated.
Yeah, that's coming up for us.
Yeah. Synthetic materials as a replacement of wood materials. Okay, so this is we could have a discussion about this as far as synthetic materials. Typically, what we don't want this on the primary elevations. We want the wood siding. We don't want the cementitious, siding. In Prince George's County, for instance, if an addition is going to go on the rear of the house, we would allow the cementitious siding as long as the finish is the smooth finish without that false, graining.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's we've kind of changed our tune a little bit on that.
Oh my God. That would, I mean, open, those gates and, I get it all the time. Well,
Yeah.
why can't I?
Well,
Why can't I? Because cementitious siding is a facsimile.
Yeah, I'll jump
Yes.
ahead to vulnerable locations. We have approved in the historic district, we have approved hardy plank on a building that has been proven to constantly rot and fail.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point here. Yeah. And I know I've dealt with some historic districts in Providence, for instance, with some of these complex detail things. There was a building, a wonderful building, almost like a Beaux-Arts style building. It was the old Providence Journal building, and it had these wonderful Corinthian pilasters with Corinthian decoration at the top. And in the 1960s, they kind of put the siding on over that, and they chopped off a lot of the features, and they restored the building, but they did use up at top this glass fiber concrete material, whatever, that was a new material. It was a synthetic material because the other was damaged, and they just couldn't replace it that way.
Yeah.
The same is true with some cornices. If you have a building that's 4 or 5 stories high, it's in a location that might be a vulnerable location as far as water damage and rot and stuff like that. I've seen historic commissions approve synthetic materials in those areas as well.
So far for us, generally for the other commissioners, it has been in very shady, dark places that tend to rot. That's where the hardy plank has been approved, where it's been shady, dark, rotting. So, and only 2 maybe that I know of.
Okay, so we talked about synthetic materials for new additions. Yeah, that's what I was getting at with Prince George's County as far as the new addition. And the type and finish, obviously we want the smooth finish. Vinyl siding is not appropriate. So I object to any historic preservation orders that they'll permits vinyl siding. So that's my thought on that. Windows and windows treatments. I think it's really important that windows are a character defining feature of house. They should always be a priority for preservation rather than replacement. And there are many arguments you can make about windows, as far as the old growth wood, the way that they function, the 2 sashes, if you know how to use your old windows, they ventilate better because you can pull that top sash down. And when we were talking about, all my heat escapes through my windows, and it's like, no, it doesn't. It actually doesn't. That's where your roof. But there are ways to improve the R factor of your windows too. I've in my own house, exterior storm windows and interior storm windows, it's great. And, that should be encouraged as well. Also, the way that people use their windows, in the wintertime, perhaps consider getting, heavier window treatments, drapes, or whatever the case might be. So there are ways that you can mitigate, this, and you don't have to rip out the windows, because replacement windows are more or less, as they say, they're replacement. You're going to be replacing them in another 10 to 15 years because they're so poorly made for the most part, and financially it's a lot I think, a lot more advantageous to spend the money restoring your historic windows, which are going to last another 100 years, when you outlay the money, as opposed to buying, replacement windows.
Yeah. Quick question, Fred, for you.
Yeah.
Looking at other preservation commissions around Maryland or where you're dealing with, are they starting to open the door to fiberglass windows as opposed to all wood windows? Are you seeing a trend at all?
Yes.
In terms of cost, number one, that's the number one argument.
Yeah.
And energy efficiency. So what are you seeing in terms of trends?
Okay, so the trends that I see are two. Okay, so I see, with regard to residential building,
Right.
housing,
Residential, right.
I still see there's this very strong movement to have those windows restored. Restored, and then using the argument, as I said, putting on interior, exterior storm windows, or whatever the case is. Now, commercial properties, I'm seeing really nice windows from old mills and other buildings being ripped out, and new windows put in that are, quote unquote, energy efficient, and they replicate the look of the old windows, the wood windows, but they're not wood windows. And I can tell you this, that a tax credit project I'm very familiar with, Old Mill Complex, the Park Service signed off on it, and they were fine. Even though those windows could have been restored, the State Historic Preservation Office signed off on it, even though it was fine. It was a tax credit project. So the trend is, unfortunately, in my opinion, that we're losing the battle on some fronts with regard to historic windows.
Windows, yeah.
Yeah.
Fred, where was that project? You said Old Mill?
It was Old Mill project. This was actually a project in Providence, in Providence, through their SHPO's office, and then it did get approved by the state. And I've seen it a number of times, both in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So yeah, unfortunately. So anyway, windows, obviously preserve these windows, maintain the historic look, and they are part of the historic fabric of the property. Later windows, what do you do with later windows? And, so let's say you have, an early 19th century house, and then it had windows that were, let's say, 2/1 windows that were put in the 1920s, and they want to replace those 1920 windows. What do you do?
Or you have a mixture in the same house.
Yes, you have a mixture in the same house. What do you do? Do we want the perfect uniform look, even though we're going to be taking out some of the quote unquote historic windows? I would say no. I mean,
yeah, exactly. No,
it's part of the story. It reads as part of the story, and those windows should be preserved, because we're looking at windows that were typically, let's say we're talking about 1920s windows, old growth wood, well made, well constructed, they've lasted, a long time, so far 100 years. So they should be preserved. Now, if we're looking at a 1960s, aluminum replacement window, whatever, that was probably cheap when they bought it, and poorly made when they bought it, no, I don't think that has a historic character to it. So yeah, I think it's a game. You have to really take an inventory of the windows in the house, and figure out which ones can be repaired, which ones cannot be repaired, which ones would be allowable to remove, and which ones have gained historic significance. So again, I think that's that's something that staff should be working, with the property owner so that they understand. And again, this whole idea about, oh, we want it to be like this perfect style, or, this everything uniform, or, we want to oldie it up with the 12/12s when it never, had that, or whatever the case is. That's not what we're about. That's not what we're at.
Exactly.
Window deterioration, I think I kind of covered this as far as repair
Yeah.
and limited replacement just now.
Yeah.
And we talked about reproduction windows, manufactured windows, and doing the
Yeah.
research. We kind of talked about this. Shutters, let's talk a little bit about shutters.
Actually, we don't have to worry about shutters.
You
I'll
don't?
just move you. No, we don't. The only thing we have to worry about is that if on a historically significant building, that the hardware is okay.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
doesn't, honestly, other commissioners, can you just chime in here? Last time we talked about the shutters was like 5 years ago, right?
The thing that drives me crazy about shutters is when they want to replace the shutters because they're deteriorated, and they put in shutters that are not. I'm not saying they have to close and function, but in theory, they should look like they should close and function.
Exactly.
Cover the
And
window.
I think, John, you can tell us, I think most folks comply with this for us.
They do, but I recently walked with a new owner who wanted to restore shutters. The shutter hardware and the mortising for absent hardware was missing in the window jambs. So obviously had shutters. I said, but you have to find a very committed restoration carpenter who was willing to hang the equivalent of French doors in an irregular opening.
Right.
And it is not a moneymaker. It's a labor of love.
Exactly. But we don't have the issue with people screwing polyester shutters onto the front of a
Oh,
house.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, we do
And
that.
I do not approve composites.
There
Good,
you go. So John handles shutters for us generally.
good. Better not to have shutters than bad shutters.
I agree.
Exactly.
That's it. Porches, again, important character defining feature. Obviously, we want to replace the balusters. If they can't be repaired, they should match the original. Again, the slide on the right is more kind of the Home Depot style. The spacing doesn't match what the original, would have been. Maintaining the historic detailing of the porch is really important. So again, we don't want to mess that up. And we also, want to avoid using these awful,
Oops.
wrought iron posts that you see here. But there are some instances where you can make some kind of accommodation for a new use, and this is a building here that glass enclosed this so that they could get a little bit more weather protection on that porch, but it doesn't diminish that porch itself. You can still see the character of that porch comes through, and I think it's perfectly acceptable. Additions and new constructions. Again, we talked about this as far as, lifestyle changes. And, usually in our historic districts, I know this is true in Annapolis, you have areas that you had very modest, small cottage type buildings. And again, these expanded over time as interior spaces were needed, new spaces to accommodate.
So we have lots of additions. Our number one application is additions.
Yeah.
Into the rear yard.
Into the rear yard. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, for new design, guiding, principles, design excellence, obviously, they should continue the local tradition. They should respect the local vocabulary of what you get there. Be careful about the sensitivity of the area. Again, the design context is important, that we want to identify the character defining features of the main house, and pick up that vocabulary a little bit in a restrained fashion with the new addition. And again, demolition of historic property should not be allowed for new construction in the historic district, and new additions, should be accomplished that minimizes, any degradation of that property, and also of.
So I'll just go ahead and jump in. Design context for us is and on an addition, and again, commissioners, we have zoning rules that allow you to create the maximum amount. And we have a challenge sometimes with our design community to say you don't need to blow it up to the maximum amount.
Right.
So how do you, what have you seen to, how do you convince a designer or a resident to say you don't need to actually blow it up to the maximum amount?
Well, just because your zoning, just because your zoning permits it, you're able to, you're able to regulate through, your ordinance by using your design guidelines and prohibit that. It's the same thing, like, if you have historic overlay zoning and it allows for, the zoning allows for, a 5-story addition in the commercial area, and there are only 3-story buildings there, you don't have to allow the maximum. I just don't think that that's, you are an overlay on top of that baseline zoning. So I think it's in your purview to say, no, that's not appropriate. And then when we talk about additions, we're going to talk about some of these principles right now. So in this slide here, I'm saying that it has to be visually subsidiary to the main block, the main building, and that's what you have to promote. So the slide on the photo on the bottom, I think, is well done. You can clearly see the main historic house, and then off to the left is this little smaller addition, and it is distinguished. You can't see it in this picture, but obviously it has new windows and the new brickwork on the chimney, and it is distinctive, and it picks up a little bit of the style of the simple house. The photo on the top is just an abomination in my mind, because you took a former church made into a residence, and the architect went wild with it. And really, it's more of a statement about the architect than, the main feature here is the upfront garage. And is this according to Secretary Standard number 9 to differentiate? It's like, no,
it's differentiated.
This is just not what it's meant to be. So anyway, I think these are two.
Fred, I want to challenge one of your points you made there about the size. I mean, you definitely have to make something subordinate and fit. So of course, like your picture here, I'm not going to support the top one, right? But if we want people to be putting their own money into these areas and to be spending their money to restore what's there, part of that is allowing them to build a house that's big enough, in this house or a business that's big enough to support a profitable or a desirable place to be investing their money.
Yes, but I'm not gonna disagree with
So what you're saying,
what you're
saying, Kevin, is that this is differentiated and it is subordinate, but it is not in this particular case. Well, you talked about the amount of space, but you raise a point that it is
right. I just fundamentally don't agree with telling homeowners or residents in a residential area that they can't build as large as they're allowed to. Because that you're going to have less money invested in the historic preservation.
Yeah. So you're reacting to my point, which I understand.
Well,
it's a balance between fitting in,
sure,
and doing what you can do. So,
why don't we see what the outcome of one of the projects that the commission approved on Southgate Avenue with Purple Cherry as the architect.
Yeah, or in Shipwright, we have several cases now when we've actually said, yes, you can go ahead and build up as much as you can, because to Kevin's point, you're entitled, you're by right, you're able to do this. And it's up to the property owner to decide whether they want to be consistent or with the streetscape, or whether they want to build their house to the biggest they possibly can. So that's the back and forth we have. I think
Yeah,
that's your point. Is that your point, Kevin?
Yeah, my point is that when someone's investing in an addition specifically, it's most likely that's their best opportunity to invest in the historic preservation at the same time, to fix the windows, to repair the roof, right? That's the moment that's our best chance to preserve the historic fabric that is there.
You're right. Got it. We want to get them into our camp to preserve their historic aspects. If they want to make an addition, is that what you're saying? Let them.
but you don't want the addition to be the focal point of
No.
the
No, our
property.
guidelines would prevent that. So,
Okay,
Right, it always has to be subordinate.
right.
Right.
yes,
Some way.
always.
It always has to be differentiated.
The
Right.
size is not
Differentiate, subordinate.
Or it literally has to be out of the viewscape.
Right. Okay. Yeah, within those parameters.
agreed.
Okay.
Good conversation. Right.
This
Whoa.
is a real picture, and I found this. This
Looks
is
like in
actually-
England.
This is in England. Yes, it is in
I was gonna say,
England.
It's British.
And this was in a book, and this is the actual heading here to this photograph. And there's a number of photographs, but this is the one I like the best. Classic modern mix. 13 striking additions to historical houses. And that's the quotes, I mean, the exclamation points of my own. But this was serious. This was actually serious comment here on this property. So I think we have, let's say, I'll be polite and generous. We have good intentions here, maybe. We have this,
This is silly.
historic building that has some really interesting brickwork and historic windows. And, that's still all there. And then talk about new additions. Here's the second story addition that's blown out here. Very contemporary looking. And then you have a green roof too. So we have to be we have to be sustainable. And so let's put a green roof on it. And obviously, in my opinion, this is all wrong and just misinterpreting, what we're trying to accomplish in preservation, because you've destroyed the historic character of this building completely. But anyway, that's what some people think. This is an honest to goodness example here. Really important, scale, massing, and form, all really important. The new buildings should be designed to complement the form and the massing of the historic buildings. And subordinate additions, we talked about that. Additions located near the primary facade should adhere more closely to the historic character, while additions that are less visible can be a little bit more adventurous. Distinguishing characteristics, again, we talked about this, perhaps changing some of the materials and modifying the proportions to make that distinction between old and new. The scale, we talked about that as well, as far as the new additions go. And lastly,
Can I go back for a second, since
Yeah.
we're with my fellow commissioners, as we're going to rewrite our guidelines, I'd like to bring up the fact that it's really important to say design additions so that there are subtle distinguishing characteristics. It's really a struggle for me when we use words like subtle. So when we were rewriting our guidelines, we should not use words that are subjective like subtle. So I'm just reacting. I'm sorry. Anyone else have a thought?
Tim, I like what it says there. We're simplifying details. I feel like that's one of the things we're often able to do when we're talking about a subordinate addition.
Yeah.
So simplifying doesn't seem as vague as subtle, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just giving, I think, some feedback to Fred, like we shouldn't be supporting words.
No,
like subtle.
I think that's a point well taken. I think that's a point well taken. I can modify that too, because I understand. I think that's really good. Uh, Yeah, okay. And then lastly, I just want to talk about garages and outbuildings and these secondary structures. Obviously, if you have a historic house, um, you don't want to have an attached garage to it. You're looking at a detached garage if it's permissible. And again, the garage should have similar orientation, setback, roof type materials as those of the, you know, secondary buildings within the district itself. So it should pick up again on the vocabulary within the district. The relationships to the primary building, the new structure should complement the layout, setback scale, roof type of the primary building.
In our historic district, we do not have this issue.
Because you don't have room for garages.
No, we have, sometimes we rebuild an exterior building, but like once in the last 5 years.
Yeah. So anyway, I won't spend so much time on it. So, subordinate, again, we talked about the size, character relate, to other outbuildings, perhaps. Windows and doors should, again, pick up on those of the principal building. And, the garage doors should be similar proportions and materials that's traditional in your district. So, I end with this last slide here, and I am totally open to any questions or comments that you might have.
Yeah, I had a comment I wanted to bring up.
Sure, Kevin.
So as relates to what I mentioned earlier about the speed of working with MHT in my experience, but I just want to reiterate, like, I feel like part of my value on the commission is representing the homeowners or the business owners experience, and the speed with which the historic preservation approvals and can go really, really impacts the experience. And it's not even necessarily the speed, but the predictability of the timing, and how highly valued that is as the person doing the work or the business doing the work. That I just don't want to forget that customer experience aspect of how we can get more people on board and more people doing complying with the historic preservation, rather than getting frustrated and giving up on it because of the speed and the timing aspects.
Yeah, and I will tell you this. I'm on this panel, this committee for MHT, where they're reevaluating, his preservation plan, and we're having these discussions periodically. I will bring this up too because I think it's really important. Like, with our historic preservation commissions, the work that you do, you have to act on these within a certain amount of time. So there is a structure. If you don't act on it, then it's approved, right?
Sure.
And there should be some mechanism. Again, you're just waiting and waiting in this dark hole, so to say, where there's no communication, and you're wondering what the status is, and it's just not right. And again, as a homeowner, lining up your contractors, lining up your materials, lining up all this kind of stuff, there has to be a sequence to this. And obviously the financial impact, of getting these credits is critical. So I will tell you this, I will definitely bring this up as a discussion point in my meetings with MHT. I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and even like you say, I back off the word speed as much as predictability of the timing.
Right. Right. Anybody else? Yes, John.
Well, we, as a historic district, don't typically approve any synthetics, but in what you presented tonight, there seemed to be at least some opportunity for synthetics to be approved on the rear of houses. I have to say that I am extremely apprehensive as the one who is the boots on the ground to
Yeah.
open that door.
But the door, the rear of, and I think in particular, I wouldn't say so much the rear of the house, but the rear of a new addition or new, construction.
No.
It's, people like to fight over these things. I
Yeah.
do it all the time. If it's okay there, why isn't it okay here?
Yeah, it's the 360 review concept that was supported in courts years ago.
Yeah.
That John, you deal with all the time. It's like it's not contributing. It's not on the primary facade. It's in the backyard. Can I do anything I want? Is that a fair sequence?
Well, frequently, but then there's one other factor too, and this is really, I think, important. A lot of people coming to Annapolis have a lot of money. They're replacing roofs that aren't leaking, roofs or they're proposing to do work that doesn't need to be done. Because they're taking on a project and they don't know where to stop. So someone on my way over to the office this evening, someone stopped me from the mayor's office. He said, "I am so glad we had a joint meeting." He said, "I am so glad you said what you did. You saved that guy $100,000. He was ready to redo all of his cedar shingles."
You don't need to do that,
because they're 30 years old and they might not possibly last. I'm just thinking, how much money are you just willing to throw away? And there's a lot of it. I'm getting roof replacements that don't need to be replaced all the time. I mean, people are sort of thinking about projects, and I think in some ways it's kind of to busy themselves.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, exactly. Or to make it look, I've got so much going on my house, and it could be like a keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing too, to a certain extent. Like,
well,
what are you doing today?
we're actually digressing.
Yeah.
Well,
into
the psychological realm of the homeowner, right?
Right. When here I am.
It's now a common trend.
I'm always saying, like, we have our guidelines. We don't want to get into the psychological mentality of our applicants. So,
well, let me ask you a question.
John has to do that. John has to do
Yeah, and let me tell you, your comment let me know it's definitely my work. I deal with it all day.
It's not always black and white, and every application is every project that comes in front of us is unique, and we apply our guidelines against that application.
So let's talk about changing technologies for a second. So what's your what is your position with the solar voltaic cells?
We luckily had plenty of them, not on a primary facade, and they have to be flush to the surface of the roof.
Okay. Have you had any installations of the new cells that look like shingles?
No, not yet.
Yeah, those are interesting. I haven't seen those yet, but I've read about them.
It hasn't been proposed yet.
Okay, but not on the primary facades. And okay.
And like I said, every single application is different. If it's not a non-contributing building, we have a less strict.
Did you have any application for the freestanding systems that aren't on the building itself?
No, we're too dense.
You're too dense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
Commissioners? All right.
So before I finish, I want to, or as I conclude, I just want to thank all of you for your real interest, and I commend you on the work that you do. I'm very familiar with many of the buildings in your historic district, and the tough challenges that you faced in the past, and the hard work it is to maintain what you have. As a matter of fact, one of my first lectures at University of Maryland in my class shows a picture of Annapolis looking at the State House and the downtown, and all these flags are flying. It's a beautiful sunny day, and it's a picture I took a few years ago. And I said, "Isn't this a wonderful picture?" And everybody said, "Yeah, it's great." And isn't Annapolis wonderful? And they got these historic buildings. And I said, Do you know how hard it is to keep this looking the way that it looks? Because if these regulations were not in place, can you imagine what this place would look like? And it's like, yeah, we have this look. You have a look in Annapolis, and it's charming, and it's historic. It reads as a historic place, as an important place, and yet it doesn't happen just on its own. It doesn't happen by the goodwill and good nature of the citizens, unfortunately. But this is where your regulations and where your ordinance and your design guidelines are just so key in all of this. So I do commend you on your work. I also just want to reiterate that MAHDC, we're a resource to you. Please feel free, Tim. John,
all the commissioners. The conference every other year is fantastic to go to.
And just call us, call me, call Leslie. We'll, if you need a letter of support or an opinion or something like that, we're more than happy to do that and provide that. So I want to close that with that offer to you, and just a reminder that we want to try to help you and make you give you the support that you need.
All right,
so thank you very much.
Thanks,
really
Fred.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was great.
All right, take care, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right.
Okay,
And before I forget, we did not approve the draft minutes when we started the meeting because there was only a few of us here, and I wanted to wait until we had more people,
All right,
thinking
I
that we
think-
would have more
and I
commissioners.
have 5 things I have to bring up.
Oh my goodness. So we have a quorum now. So
I'm sorry, there's a maximum of 3 per meeting, John.
Okay,
Well,
I'll
so
combine.
Bobby,
I'll
if you
combine
want
a
to
couple.
go ahead and propose the minutes, then
We
we have
have
a
3 of them to do. The first is July 10th. Are there any comments or questions on July 10th?
Nope.
Okay, I move that we approve the draft meetings from July 10th.
All in favor? I think we're all here.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The second one is July 27th. Do we have any questions or comments on it?
Nope.
I need a motion then.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the final one is September 12th of this year. Any comments or questions? Okay, then I need a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All
We're
right,
all here.
those are done.
Yeah,
John, you're
thanks.
up.
Okay,
Thanks, Bobby.
I'll try to be brief. Let's see, I should save the least complicated of them for well, no, they're all complicated. Okay.
So by the way, this is other we're into now other administrative business.
So actually
There
this,
is? What?
this one's fairly straightforward. To Market Space, Middleton Tavern. Middleton Tavern would like to return to a standing seam metal roof. What they had was a painted turn-coated roof prior to the 1967 fire. It was on the building for at least 100 years. The replacement material that the new owners would like to use is not painted turn metal. What they want to use is the Freedom Gray. And
Yeah. So John, are you raising discussions under other administrative business, or are you raising?
oh, sorry, should I not bring this up now?
If it's a actual application specifically for one building, we should talk about it as either a pre-application or
This is an administrative approval, and I'm reaching out to
okay.
commissioners for. an
All right,
opinion.
gotcha. So you're saying, is this administrative or not? Okay.
This is it. No, this is administrative. Because they're returning something to its original form.
So you're informing us of an administrative approval.
Right.
Are you looking for feedback?
Well, I'm interested because I'm I'm
Ah,
on the fence about it to a degree because it's not the original material, but of course the original material isn't available. They don't want to use a painted steel. They want to use a slightly different Freedom Gray material, which I don't know if you all are familiar with. So I thought I would I'm going to send it out in an email and see what you all have to say. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and
I
then
don't typically do that.
thank you.
Yeah, then we'll look at, administrative approvals or not. And so replacement in
Well,
kind is, so
right.
are you saying is this replacement in kind if the color changes?
We
Or the
don't
materials.
control color, but
Oh.
it's not painted turn coated either. And of course, that's not available. So I'll send it out in an email. Okay.
Okay,
This is I'm letting you know that I did not approve the painting of the last unit of Factors Row. And that is at the corner of Market Space and Cornhill Street. And
Reardon's.
there is, right, it's the front facade is, and Tim, you've been here long enough to know the front facade is rebuilt.
Yes.
And some of the brick that's in the front facade was salvaged from the original
Yes.
facade, but it's a new facade. It hasn't been painted. And they're saying, well, there's some paint on some of these reused bricks. We should be allowed to paint the rest of it. And I said, I think that this is you could change the color of the paint on the painted bricks that are existing. But if you want to paint all of the bricks and create opacity, it's a new facade and you would have to get approval from the commission.
Approval, yeah.
So do you consider that consistent?
Yeah, I think it's an alteration.
Right. So that's what I thought.
Other commissioners, that's an alteration of the facade.
I just want to bring it up because it's easy to forget that that's a new facade. But it is. Okay.
What was the new facade done under a historic preservation
There
permit?
it was a long process where the owners had allowed demolition by neglect due to a leaky roof, which had compromised the front facade of the building and ultimately compromised the entire building.
Yes,
And it was
the corner.
it was a fight. That was a fight to
Yeah.
keep the one original wall.
Yeah.
So
But
I
it's
just
an
happened to be
alteration.
walking by.
It's not I don't think that's administratively approvable. It's an alteration, major alteration.
Okay.
And we may or may not approve it, but I don't know, but we'll see it.
Right. So Kevin and Bobby, I'm just going to say that the Burtis house had water infiltrate this weekend. So there is definitely an urgency. Tim, you're already aware of this, but I'm hoping that MHT gives its blessing from the easement committee, and we can move forward with hearing the application at the next public hearing meeting.
October 12th, right?
Right. It's isn't that the 10th? 10th.
Tenth, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's posted. It's been advertised. Okay. Next thing, and the new director asked me to talk about this. And Bobby and Kevin had already heard this too. So we have a new inspector who's been going around writing up violations. And in this case, he wrote up numerous violations for trash cans on sidewalks, permanently housed on sidewalks. And so
commercial or
commercial and residential. And
Commissioner, what kind of commissioner is he? Who does he work?
He's a code enforcement officer. He's an inspector. So
Was this like community standards?
well, it is actually part of the code. So, you know, I'm thrilled that, you know,
We have so many.
he's diligent, but unfortunately, what they're saying is they're calling this office and saying, well, what do we do? Because there's no solution, there's just a violation. So my suggestion to one of the people that I spoke with today, besides the director, the new director of planning and zoning, Chris Jakubiak, I said that I would talk about it. So my thought is to create a minimalist enclosure. Not that I want to do this, but to just create an enclosure out of approvable materials, not synthetics, that could be accessed by both those who are the residents or the users, the occupants of the building, and then also for trash pickup. I'll create a design. I don't
Right.
want to do this, but I don't know what to do.
Well, I'll defer to other commissioners.
I'm having a hard time picturing it. I mean, are we talking places like Cornhill Street where there literally is nowhere to put trash cans? Or are we talking about somebody where there's an alley behind and the trash cans could go in the alley?
It is everywhere. It's Prince George Street, it's Cornhill Street, it's Conduit Street.
I don't think we can.
And-
From what you've seen so far, are a majority of these, and I don't want to use harsh language here, but is it where people are just lazy and leaving their cans out? Or is it where they have no other option? Because I would treat those two instances completely differently.
Well, of course, I do.
Oh, I
I
know,
do.
I know.
Right.
That's-
So if
yeah.
there is an alley, there's no question. Take them back, put them in your alley.
Right.
But when there isn't an alley, when you're talking about row houses or townhouses, becomes more challenging, because that means that either people are keeping their trash in the backyard and then taking it through the house, or if you have a second story tenant with very steep 19th century service stairs as their main stairs, literally it's unsafe. And so I was going to suggest, and this is, we don't have to come up with a solution immediately, we just have to think about it.
Well, I'm excited that we have enforcement of some sort, which is great. But what code are they enforcing when they are citing people?
Well,
It's
I'll
probably not.
I'll put it in the email.
It's probably not under 2156, which is our code.
Right. But
so
ultimately, it's this office that's getting the calls.
Right.
The historic
I feel
district,
bad for
what do we
you.
do?
I feel
It's
bad
not
that
our-
you got-
it's not our issue, but the solution is our issue, the potential solution.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So
So what I thought, because it's more than one person, and one of the people who is I think sort of representing a group of homeowners is Chris Ledoux. And
okay.
right, and a familiar name for some of us.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to do is figure out a standard that doesn't require a variance, that doesn't require a public hearing, that can be administratively reviewed. Unless you all want to start reviewing these trash enclosures, and I mean, this is what's coming. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to take it away, but I want some feedback. I'm taking it from you.
I am concerned about this because, I mean, to have this on so many houses and so many locations down in the historic district, and I'm just reminded on some international trips I've been to that they have like a trash collection station as opposed to having it individually at people's houses, and you take it to the trash collection station, which tends to be more accessible and things like that.
Well, I saw that in Barcelona last year, and
Yeah.
it was fine for Barcelona.
Yeah,
But I don't think it's going to
that's
fly
not
on
realistic,
Conduit
Jared.
Street.
Yeah, and not with what people are paying for trash pickup, let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Well, but I saw it in Argentina, and I saw it in Mexico City and some
Yeah.
other places.
I'll give you I'll give you another example. I was in Edgartown, Massachusetts, and on Martha's Vineyard, and we rented a house, and we didn't understand where there was going to be trash pickup or whatever. They do not allow trash containers on their street. So the trash collection people come into your yard and pick up your trash. So there are no trash containers on the street, and that's their code. That would be a fascinating concept. I don't think it would work here, but so John, you're actually talking about the idea of modifying our fence guidelines to be around a trash can.
Well,
Is
not
that what people are
exactly.
asking
That's
for?
not exactly what I'm saying. First of all, I was asked by the new director to bring this up. So
Okay.
this is new business from the new director because he's getting a lot of calls about this. But actually, I was thinking, so if you put something in the public right of way, if something is created that is permanent within the public right of way, it requires a variance. So that's one step. It could be approved as a fence with a variance. I could do that administratively. But what I'm also very concerned about is a cumbersome approval process. Because HPC could end up being the bad guy here. And this is not our enforcement issue. It would just be a review issue.
Agreed.
Yeah.
John, I think you should. I will be happy to talk to Chris and say, this is other commissioners. This is not in our sandbox.
But it is. Because it's
How?
right out in front of every house that's been cited. They're not going to take their trash cans away. The trash
With
cans are gonna
citation,
stay.
what they're not citate. They're not.
Well,
citing someone.
I'll send it. I'll send it.
Yeah, I don't understand.
I'm giving
this
you
at
the
all.
I'm giving you the brief here.
I think you're opening up. We're opening up Pandora's box. Of,
If you can give us enough information, including maybe some specific addresses, so like I'm gonna go down and walk the street and see what it looks like and see for myself, what it is, because I'm having a hard time picturing it.
Okay,
Me too.
well, I think that's a good first step. So we've started the discussion. I'm not sure what the solution is. I had an idea for certain places, but let me tell you, when you start handing out fines to people, they want their solutions fast.
This is crazy that this would be the first thing they're handing out fines for.
Yeah, of
We have
all the
other
things he goes for first.
Well,
If
If he wants a list,
I-
we can give him a list of things.
No, he might be doing all of these because he's trying to demonstrate competency in his new position. He maybe have handed this list. So
Oh,
I don't.
This
I
came
feel
out
bad
of
for
this
the
came out of the
guy.
blue. I think we're all agreeing this one came out of the blue
Yeah.
for us, John.
well, y'all are going to have to adjust because it came out of the blue for me too. But I get about 10 of those a day. So I'm just saying this is not going to go away. But you have some time to think about it. So we'll try to. I'm saying I'm going to include you in the development here. This is, I think, for some places it's going to be like, unfortunately, the equivalent of sidewalk furniture, unless I can figure out a way to get these violations to go away. And I don't think that that's going to happen.
Well, again,
If
I would
there-
like
if
to know
there's-
what violation, what. It's
Well,
not
you're asking a
public-
question that I can't answer right now, so I
Yeah.
said I'd put it in an email for the third time. All right,
Yeah,
next thing.
Thanks for the notification, John.
All
We
right.
appreciate
All
it.
right.
And I think this guy who's the inspector is in between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, I think he went for some low-hanging fruit here for himself. All right, so two
No,
market
to
space.
show he was satisfying his job because he had just been hired.
Well, I wish you were more ambitious.
Well-
With things that are actually more difficult. That one's easy.
Well, I just,
right.
you know, I recognize he doesn't know the true parameters now or the parameters, and that may need to be clarified. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Well, so, and believe me, I take no pleasure in talking to people about enclosing their trash cans as though it's the most, you know, it's a front burner issue. All right,
Exactly.
lights.
Is more
Lights.
attractive trash cans the issue?
Oh my God.
Yeah, so, so lights,
So what I've been doing is I've been walking around and telling them that since the trash cans are made of polyvinyl chloride, they are not approvable. No, I'm sorry.
that's extreme.
Lights, last one, lights at
Light.
level.
Mhm.
Are we
At level,
requiring
we
trash
should,
cans to be compostable now?
interesting idea. Yeah, so, John, we all, I think, at level, Jennifer emailed a lot of people up again about,
No, she
concern.
won't stop.
Right, so, what do you think our next step is in terms of lights, on street furniture?
Well, I think that I have said to Level that I'm happy to discuss alternatives, and there are many alternatives. I talked last meeting about planters with vegetation in them that have lights on them, and I sent that to her in an email. I talked about putting lights on the interior of windows, and then maybe putting up a small piece of trim so they don't shine on patrons. You know, if you want to illuminate and enliven your business, but mostly all they do is come back to the string lights, and because someone of influence strung lights across the first block of West Street. They want that too, but they want it on a lower level. So it's a bit of a broken record, but this is what I'm proposing. I will get in touch with them and say, we need a site meeting. I want to go over all of the alternatives for you here. You can decide on what you want to do, but the attacks are personal. I mean, I heard from 3 people today. She is so mad at you. Oh, really? Really? So just saying.
Well, so in this particular case, apparently she testified it. I didn't see it, but last week's city council meeting, and then she emailed all of us about their particular case. But do you think at this point we should clarify or go back to our sidewalk guidelines? Right now it says light fixtures in outdoor dining shall be simple in design, self-contained, and placed on tabletops. No wiring shall encroach on the public way. That doesn't really address the idea of lights in trees, which I think isn't Jennifer's request to put lights in trees in planters?
No, that was my suggestion. Because because it really isn't covered by the guidelines. They say, okay, well, you could do this, and you know, this is simple enough. Will this satisfy you? And I really think what they want to do is go back to what they were required to take down. Just bringing up that it was Public Works that was the complainant here. How dare they? They bent this sign. They have the lights going around the signs. You know, this is.
So they put they strung their signs, their lights
around street signs.
Well, yeah, that's not our problem again.
Well, actually, it ended up being our problem because, you know, we're the ones who enforce what goes into sidewalk cafes.
Right. Well, so Next steps, have you responded to Jennifer? She actually is kind of confronting a whole bunch of people. So as the HPC, do we need to, we don't need to do anything. This is not a pre-application for anything. So
Well, I
we
haven't
don't,
gotten anything from them.
so we don't, as an
did-
HPC,
this
we
is-
don't need,
Right, this is what we want. This is what we want. We want to have string lights. We want string lights over everything. We want to look like the first block of West Street. And
which
that's
has lights strung from building to building.
building
It
to
does not
building.
have, it
Right.
does not have lights strung across the sidewalk.
That's actually been offered to them.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is from our point of view as a commission, this has been raised, and perhaps our guidelines on lighting on street furniture, we maybe should look at that and be more clear
Well,
on our next iteration. We have other things that have come up. We have some things in the materials. I think as a commission, we all did a great job in coming up with them.
it was
guidelines. But
it was a very important revision, and I use it all the time. But I want to say, and I want to remind you that, you know, I've had a muckraking reporter in my office over this issue. This is not a little thing.
I know it's not.
So you know,
Well, well, I think we did a great job as a commission to come up with we were a bit reactive because of all of the outdoor dining, but maybe at this point we should go back and revisit all of it and say, is this really, you know, lighting, umbrellas, we have planters and planting. So maybe we should just take a quick look at some of these things. And John, would that help you?
Possibly, but I think what we need to do is clarify our position on lights.
So focus on lights.
I deal with it all the time.
Focus on lights,
it's-
then you're saying.
It's odious. Because it's an ephemeral situation. It's not a permanent change. You know, it's reversible. Every single one of
Everything's
the lights is
reversible, yeah.
Yeah.
They're totally within the streetscape. So do we want to give our streetscapes over to businesses that want to be noticed? And that's
Yeah.
what this is all about. And Level's argument is others have it, why can't we?
Yeah, which
And
is
others
a
have it
valid.
because nobody's enforcing the language that's already out there.
Actually,
I
I
would-
have, and
No, I know, but I'm
And
saying you're not getting the
everyone
backup
that
you should
is-
get.
everyone that is involved in the enforcement quakes because the first thing that happens is the phone gets picked up and the call goes to the mayor's office.
Yes, and
That's what I'm
we
saying.
say this in virtually
Yeah.
every single meeting. Cafe Normandy does not seem to have enforcement. I
Well,
guess.
they've also had encouragement.
So that's a problem, and we can't do anything about that, unfortunately. But what we can do is be a little more clear about permanent lighting, because we always allow temporary anything. So temporary means 3 months or less.
Well, we're going into the less season.
Yes. Well, yes.
So
Some-
one of my thoughts, I'll put this out in an email also. One of my thoughts was that we have a period of the year. The HPC allows and considers this as part of the new guidelines when lights can go up and when lights should come down seasonally.
Yeah, we don't have dates in our current guidelines, so you're saying we should add dates.
Because what Annapolis businesses want, of course, some businesses like Federal House wanted lights up year round. but and they had their string lights around the features of the building, windows, doors,
Which was an
cornice.
adverse impact onto the building.
Fine for the holidays, but when they're on in May, it's a problem. So
Memorial Day,
excuse me.
Memorial Day.
Oh yeah, well, they were taken down before Memorial Day, but they actually did have them on the previous year for Memorial Day. Took a year to get them down.
Yeah.
Pushback
interesting-
from other offices.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that when we talk about temporary, the sign ordinance is where we talk about temporary or not. We haven't really talked about lights being temporary or not. So maybe we should look at our
It's
Our
it's a new thing. It's not going to go away. And frankly, these businesses are paying astronomical rents.
Yeah, I know. We want to support them. We do.
Right.
So my thinking is that the concept of quote unquote temporary or seasonal has something we've been applied to signs. We maybe need to look at that for lights. We might need to look at our sidewalk furniture guidelines, which we have a lighting section. Maybe lighting doesn't even belong there. So I think we should.
I think it does because we need to go broader with it because principally the places that want the string lights are sidewalk cafes or.
Okay. I guess maybe we need it in both places then because.
Right.
The lighting on the facade or on the cornice of a building is just, it's not in sidewalk lighting. So what I'm saying, you see what I'm saying? Lighting is different. It's two different things.
The trash cans, string lights. I mean, honestly, it's so trivial. and it's so time consuming.
Yeah. All right.
So,
well, anything else, John?
Well, when can we so I'm gonna take the advocating side. When can we talk about these lights? When do you think is a
Why
good
don't-
one?
Well,
Should
why
I
don't
Put together a
we
presentation?
why don't we look at what we've talked about tonight in terms of changing guidelines so that you can point to a guideline when someone has a complaint in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then before our October 10th meeting, or is it 12th?
Mhm.
We'll bring it up again.
Okie doke.
Does that make sense? Other
Yes.
commissioners, right? I mean, this is something John and I can, will you let me and John talk about it?
Yep.
And bring it back to you?
Yeah, and I could talk to you more about it. I do want to say though, one thing has changed just a bit, and that is architects are now starting to come in with their preliminary designs for zoning review prior to demanding HPC pre-applications.
Yay. So that worked.
Whew. Okay, that was it from me.
All right.
Was that all 5?
Oh, I could go on, but those are the hot numbers. That's my top 5.
Well, we've gone on. So other commissioners' concepts,
Nope.
thoughts? Yeah, I thought, how did you feel the training went tonight?
Good.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think Fred is always very thorough, and
He is.
his background in historic preservation and law is really very helpful. He's just
You probably heard me move him along a little bit.
well, it was extended, but I mean, he does have so much knowledge that I really benefit from it. Even though I used to have my office right next to him and used to hear him talking all the time. But anyway.
And since it's recorded, the commissioners that couldn't make it tonight will have the opportunity to review
Yeah.
it. So.
Exactly. All right. And just another announcement for me, there's lots of new information about the city dock plan. There's a public meeting, there's a work session October 5th. Thank you. I'm not sure everyone has responded yet on October 19th. I'm going to launch a question. I don't think there's public comment yet on either of these meetings. I think there'll be written comment, but I don't know. We're going to have a joint session between with the Planning Commission, and I will check with Alex Pline, but I do not believe they will allow, they don't want public comment in either of these meetings. So, but written comment might be a possible. So the issue I have personally had is that we still have not had public comment on these designs.
Could I
So-
add something?
Sure.
So this is a work session that is occurring without zoning review.
Which one? The one on the 5th or the one?
Exactly. Well, both of them, right?
So there's site design, there are site design comments that have been made requiring additional information. However, for instance, the Maritime Welcome Center has had 0 zoning review, which is significant.
So I would ask the commissioners, we should say we don't want to go to a joint session with the Planning Commission if we haven't had all these other steps. We don't have to, just say we're going to do this. John, you're raising a very good point. There are steps in this process that are not being followed.
Well,
But we've asked to be part of the process.
We're
To be involved. So even though we're not officially involved yet, I think it's smart for us to be aware of what's going on and watching the interplay between the City Dock Action Committee and the plan. I mean, obviously they're going to have to jump through all the steps. And when it gets to us, though,
right.
we want to know how it got there.
Yeah.
And if there's the opportunity at an earlier stage for one of us, however, in whatever manner is appropriate, to go, hey, we might have a problem with that, so that they don't get all the way to us and then we have to back them up again.
I agree with you, Bobby. I just brought it up so that you know. And the other thing is that the Maritime Welcome Center could be a stage 2 or a stage 3 construction.
What do you mean? Like not part
There
of
are
the-
three planned
Right, there's the
stages
three
for
stages,
this.
yeah.
And so it could be a second stage or a third stage. So there's plenty of time for
Yeah,
a design comment and so on. So I absolutely do think you should move forward with the meeting, but I do not think that you can comment concretely on the Maritime Welcome Center because it hasn't yet had zoning review. But there are a lot.
Well,
The other portions of the project are starting that process. Comments have been made.
Well, what's great about we can only comment on our purview.
Right.
So we can make our comments. We won't have public comment, but if you communicate with anyone else who wants you to make a point, we can. So as commissioners in this meeting, we can make our public comments known. And it won't necessarily have with zoning review, which might have to do with other things, but we should be looking at our guidelines regarding this potential building. So.
Wasn't the issue that this is directly adjacent to the Burris house?
That's one of the issues. We would have an adverse impact on the historic property. Yep, that would be one of them.
I mean, that to me would be a major avenue for us to.
No, you could comment.
Well, and Kim, there is an easement on Burtis House, and the Maritime Welcome Center is planned to be built on Burtis House, on the Burtis House lot, at least partially. So it has to go through that process also.
Is it an HA or easement or?
MHT.
MHT. Yeah, so I think you're right.
That's a
I was
challenge.
possibly was overreacting to say if we shouldn't even talk about this until we have the site review from planning and zoning.
And
But we can comment, at least as commissioners. My concern is that when we get to our approval process, that's the first time that we might have public comment. People who can come up to the podium and make their comments. That process has not happened yet.
Right, true.
So we have to be the voice of the public at this point, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So last note, Bryce Turner is expected to be in the meeting on the 19th.
Oh, great.
Bryce, who is he?
He's the architect.
Okay.
So hopefully you've all seen the things I forwarded to you. You can see it. It's interesting.
No, I did see it, and actually, yeah, that was very useful, Tim. Thank you
Yeah.
for forwarding that. That was very helpful.
Okay. All right. Any other business?
Well, for administrative meeting, we've gone on for 3 hours.
I know. Well, thank you all. It is actually important that from our as a certified local government for Historic Preservation Commission, we have to have training every year, and it's paid for. And so I thank you all for doing that because it maintains our status.
Well, and I have to say, Fred, as a co-employee with me, it does a really good job of pulling this off. I really appreciate all the levels he's involved with,
Yeah.
education and protection and all these other things and training. He's
Yeah.
really doing above and beyond what you might expect.
Yeah.
And you know, he talked for about 2 hours here, and
Yeah.
he's got a law degree in addition to historic preservation training. So the stuff he brings out is just amazing. So
Yeah.
thank you for setting this up. I really appreciate it.
All right. All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.